Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. I'm Troy Singer, and as always, here with Bart, Caylor. And our quest is to interview higher ed marketers that we admire for the benefit and then hopefully the betterment of the entire higher ed community. Bart, as you know, today we talked to Bridget Kurkowski, the Vice President of Enrollment Services at Encora. For our listeners, she comes to us with over 2 decades of experience. She has dedicated her career to enhancing the effectiveness of enrollment strategies and the professional development of admissions leadership and their teams. She's here today offering her insights on the evolving landscape of the enrollment management portion of our community and the critical role of mentorship and development in this field.
Yeah, I love the conversation with Bridget. I always appreciate when we have a chance to talk to somebody who literally started out as a 22-year-old admissions counselor and they've raised up through the ranks and now they really have, a great deal of expertise and knowledge to share. I think that with that with her experience comes that wisdom that I think that she really demonstrates on the podcast today. And so it's going to be a little bit more enrollment focused, but there's enough that as marketers, we need to understand the entire process. Even if you might not be specifically reporting up through enrollment, I think that she brings a lot to the table to help you kind of hone your craft and be able to especially articulate the brand benefits of your institution. So a great conversation.
And she offers it in such an authentic way.
Yeah.
So here is our conversation with Bridget. Bridget, we start out our episodes by staying on mission and educating our listeners about our guest. And with your help, would love to know if you could share something that you've recently learned or experienced that you think would fall into the interesting or fun category.
I'm not sure if it's interesting or fun, but I've always been a student of intergenerational conversations and interactions. My husband and I actually were just talking about it as well. And I had to do a lot of work in my last administrative role because there was a pretty big gap between me as a millennial and my admissions counselors who were Gen Z. And so I've been starting to do some research on Gen Alpha, just kind of interested. I have a son who is Gen Alpha, and just, since they're starting to get to that junior high school level, I just thought, just wanting to stay up to date on some of the similarities, the differences of them, just as we continue to recruit those students to make sure we're giving them what they're looking for and what they want and what they find genuine in the experience. So that's what I've been spending my last couple of weeks on is doing some Gen Alpha research and feeling very old in that process.
That's great.
Well, then I have to ask you, Bridget, would you like to share some of that now, or should we tease our listeners for anything that you've learned for them to reach out to you for those details? Maybe we'll just do that and get into our conversation because you're someone I feel everyone needs to be in contact with.
Teaser, yes, I'm good with that if you are, most definitely. Yeah.
And yes, that definitely falls into the interesting for higher ed professionals category. Everyone, I would like to present to you Bridget Kurkowski, and she is with Encora. Bridget, could you let everyone know in your words what Encora does, and then please tell everyone your role there?
Yeah. Well, Encora really is a SaaS platform, and so it's a way for institutions to use technology to be better enrollment managers and territory managers. It's a way to read and evaluate enrollment data to get a better idea of ways to be more efficient in your recruiting experiences. And thanks to that platform, I have a position at Encora, which is the team of consultants that works with institutions all over the United States to do monthly meetings and strategy sessions to help analyze that data, just give an extra hand. We like to call ourselves like the extra admissions professional on your team that you don't have to pay the salary and benefits for, just to help on all of those things. I always say, like that Post-it note that you have on your computer when you take your work home with you at night, And then you get about halfway through that Post-it note, and then you're like, you know what, it's 11 o'clock. I should probably go to bed. Like, give us those last two or three things on that Post-it note. So we work a lot with institutions just to help them be as efficient as humanly possible when it comes to recruiting their incoming classes.
Thank you. And because of your background and your position, because you get to speak to a lot of different professionals at different institutions and helping them develop their teams, we really wanted to get your perspective on a number of different things. And the first thing we like to do it on is the current challenges. So, if you would, could you share some of the major hurdles that admissions leadership and their teams are experiencing and how they are currently impacting the field?
Yeah, it's probably the worst spring ever to ask anyone that question.
Yeah.
Besides the obvious, it's like Lord Voldemort. Like, we're just not going to say it out loud because it's still giving people bad dreams. But it just adds to the tumultuous nature of higher education and enrollment management. It's an incredibly high stress job, which go figure, right? Like, responsible for most of the revenue of keeping an institution afloat, and ipso facto sometimes the community in which that college lives in. So it's an incredible amount of stress that you're putting on teams, VPs, middle managers, especially 21 to 23-year-old admissions counselors coming in for the first time. So we're seeing probably the biggest thing is just lots of turnover. And again, I don't necessarily blame anyone for that. Like, it's tough. It's tough to try to keep your head above water. So I think because of that, you lose so much education and knowledge and experience and training in all of that turnover, which just kind of leaves, and I think is leaving, a large vacuum within these offices. They just don't know exactly sometimes what to do next, which is a terrible shame and puts the institution in really great peril.
Yeah, I think what I've seen too, just to echo that, Bridget, is, I do a lot of work with a lot of schools like you do, and it does break my heart sometimes just to see the defeated perception that a lot of people have, because I think that, one, obviously processes can be put in place that'll help with that, as well as professional development and allowing these 22, 23-year-old admissions counselors to kind of see and understand a pathway where they can actually make a career out of things. Because, as we all know that, no one asks us as kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you don't say an admissions professional or a higher ed administrator. It kind of happens from within. And I think that the more that we as leaders can help the younger generation as they start embarking on those journeys to see that. And so I often work with some other consultants that kind of help with that. But I mean, are you seeing that even as you talk to people that, and even in your own experience, being able to, identify those young counselors that a lot of times, I mean, you might have them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, if you're lucky, to really be able to figure out ways to kind of hold on to them for a little bit longer to kind of keep that revolving door from just continuing?
Absolutely, Bart. I think it's a real challenge. I mean, I remember, over the last couple of summers, especially as we were coming out of the pandemic, admissions offices having like 10, 15, 20 positions open as they were moving into recruiting in the fall class. And I mean, I started in September as an admissions counselor, so I know what it's like to be thrown into the fire. But I think most definitely that's the issue. And I think we've talked about it before. Now we've got even more poaching that is happening within the industry too, as people see really great admissions counselors out there on the road doing a good job. So it's really tough. And it's not like a ton of institutions have a lot of resources to provide professional development experiences, spend a ton of time even in office doing professional development type experiences. or being able to really help give salaries that can help support those admissions counselors and or even directors of admissions to keep them a bit longer as well. So it's kind of multi-pronged challenges kind of facing people who want to try to keep those individuals engaged on campus too.
Yeah, and I'm sure what I'm starting to see too are just some of these collaborations and different projects that either schools themselves are doing, or they're looking at larger groups, whether it's a NACAC or other professional organizations that can help, carry some of the burden of the training, of some of the additional incentives of helping the students or the young professionals stay in place. What are some of those things that you're seeing that you kind of point to say that seems to be working, or that process works out really well?
It's been encouraging. I think most definitely for a little bit, I wondered if it was just me, that maybe it was just me seeing these struggles or challenges. And I'm sure we all probably individually thought
Yeah.
that. But definitely now, seeing that NACAC certificate program come up for data science, seeing some of these organizations doing more to help lift up middle managers, admissions counselors. We're trying to develop as well, programs to help new and emerging leaders. I think you start to see at least it being publicized more, opportunities for people to get involved that maybe are not expensive or free or virtual. Right, in order to try to meet people in the middle, when it's just not as easy to get away or have the extra time to do those things as well. So to me, it seems like we're all recognizing. It's finally we're all coming together and recognizing the problem and working together to try to figure this out and see if there's a way we can keep people in this industry longer. Most definitely.
Yeah, that's great. I'm associated with. I know a lot of people on the podcast audience know that I do a lot of work in the faith-based area. So there's an organization called NACAP, which is kind of a faith-based version of what NACAC does as well, a little bit smaller, obviously a lot smaller scale. But they have what they call a leadership development for enrollment professionals. And they bring in, many industry leaders and people specific to certain aspects of enrollment, the enrollment profession. So I come in and I teach on, finding mission fit students and marketing around that. And they'll bring in other people that come in and do talk about data or talk about, slate or whatever those things are. And so I do think that idea of coming together as a larger group to, protect the industry, protect that is such a critical thing. And I'm glad you guys are a part of that as well.
Bridget, would love to hear your take on the importance of experience in the field, as a lot of times, as you've probably heard, we leave the promotion of the investment, which is a major investment, to the families that we are offering our institutions to, but the people who are talking to them the most might be some of the most inexperienced people within the institution. So would love to hear your take on that and to know of what your thoughts are.
Mm-hmm. It's been pretty hammered into my psyche since I think I interviewed for my admissions counselor job. I will not say what year that was. The president of my alma mater, who I was applying for, when I interviewed for the job, he's like, I need you to explain. And I went into a small private school. He's like, I need you to tell me about our institution, and you can't use the word small, warm, and friendly. And I sat there for about 5 minutes because I was like, I'm like, I hope he's not been on one of my tours, because I use all three of those words a lot. And it was funny to me as I've walked around some NACAC college fairs just recently, how many times I hear small, warm, and friendly, several years after the fact. And so it's, I think it's always been important for me. And I remember my vice president telling me hey, we're asking our families to invest a lot of money, and, at the time, a lot of money into our institution. We've got to be able to tell them why it's worth it. Why us and not not another school, because in our world, and actually in a lot of worlds, it was our large state, public institution where we were cross-apping and cross-accepting with mostly. We weren't really competing that much with the other private schools. And so that's really just been something I've always been a proponent of. And I've had some really good teachers in my experience to help teach me, to help teach others about how you really need to and needle probably isn't the right word, but you've got to get that out of your students and their parents and guardians, like, what's really the most important things to you, and what can I do to provide those things to you? And if you ask the right questions, and if you ask the right open-ended questions, you're going to get that information. And then it's your job to make sure that you give them what they want and help build trust and build a relationship. So at the end of the day, when they get those financial aid packages and sit them out in front of them, it really is mostly a decision based off of fit, and not cost. And I know that's a hard thing to sometimes say, because I know cost is really an important factor for a lot of families too. But I always used to tell my admissions counselors too, for some kids, $1 might be too much to come to our institution if they don't find the value of coming here. And so it's all kind of relative, I think, as you teach admissions counselors and assistant directors and even directors of admissions the value of really focusing on what you've got and making sure that you're a good caretaker of that student's experience. And their family's experience through the funnel.
Oh, that was perfect. I mean, that was great, because I was actually going to pull out some things that you said just to underscore, because I love the fact that you kept using the word value, because I think that sometimes at the beginning you talked about cost, but then you quickly switched to value. And I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of us, from enrollment professionals, and I'm going to overlay marketing and communications on that, is that we use the wrong words when we're trying to communicate to prospective students and families. We talk about cost as opposed to affordability, or talking about, we talk about value when we should be talking about value and investment, because at the end of the day, could I say that $1 is too much to spend on something? Yeah. Is $1 too much to invest in something? Well, no. I know I'm going to get more out of that. If I put that $1 in, I'm going to get a greater return on the other end. And I think that too many times that we fail to really communicate the value of the investment that the parents and the family are going to get. They already have bought into the investment of higher ed because they're taking a campus tour. But do they understand the investment of what that return on the investment is going to be for your institution? And I really like at the beginning, you talked about the idea of really being able to, be clear on your mission and what those differentiations are. And I'm going to do my shameless plug, Troy. In my book, I spend a whole chapter on the idea of figuring out who you are, because once you figure out who you are as an institution, that's beyond the small, warm, and friendly. You start to then define your space, and you start to define your tribe. And then those people can self-identify to say, that's what I want. And I think it's only when we're clear in not only articulating it in our brand, but also articulating it in our communications. And that's why I think it's important, as you've indicated, there's some training in there. I mean, I applaud your president for that challenge. And I would love that everybody has that challenge when they go into it, because as I say in the book, I have had so many times when I'm meeting with a school for the first time and we're talking about their marketing, I ask them, give me your elevator pitch. And it's always about, well, we're a small XYZ. We've got a 5-to-1 or it's 8-to-1 student ratio to faculty. The faculty are more like mentors where they have dinner I'm just like, you know what? So has every other private school in this country. And so, certainly, yes, that differentiates you from the flagships and the community colleges and other things, but it doesn't really give you the same opportunity that you might have if you're more articulate. So I love that. That's a great thing. Is there anything you would add to that as we kind of have that conversation?
I was just going to ask you part two, like, as I see marketing materials come in or look at college marketing materials, like, it always amazes me usually how the first postcard is always the same. And if anyone asks me, like, what should I lead with? Usually I'm like, outcomes is what you should lead with. And I always talk about, you say investment a lot. Like, I like talking about the college's investment in the student. Is your financial aid and affordability postcard or email, where's it at? And usually it's 5 or 6. And I'm like, that really has to be 1 or 2, right? You can't do fluffy up first and then hard hitting in the middle and at the end, because they're going to stop reading those emails by the time they get to the hard hitting stuff. And so I think it's about like putting it all out there, I think, really. And sometimes as an admissions counselor, or for me as a director of admissions, when I talk to families, it means sometimes you have to ask hard questions. But again, I think I've never had an experience where someone has been offended. All the time, it's helped to develop the relationship even farther and build more trust between us and the families that we're working with, because they know we're just there to try to make this work out too, and we're trying to give them everything that they need. And again, it's really hard in those instances, I think, for someone to say no, because they're invested in the relationship and experience too. So it's like you said, it's just incredibly important to focus on those things right away. And if it means being hard hitting and in your face to make it happen, I think we need to do it. And especially now when we've got to hit those classes.
Yeah, I would agree. And I love your word trust, because I think that's, too many times higher ed hates the word sales to begin with. And so I know that, I'll probably get mail about that, but it is sales, but at the end of the day, it's consultative sales. I've done consulting sales my entire career. And, if somebody asks me, are you a salesperson? I'm like, depends on what you mean. Because I don't see myself as a salesperson as much as a consultant that has something that, I'm offering to you that I think you need. And so I think that when we approach that, even as our families, that gives us a little bit more boldness to ask the questions, to be able to, maybe have the hard conversations, maybe even ask for the sale to say, hey, it sounds like might be a good fit. You want to go ahead and fill out the application before you leave today? And it's things like that I think, I can imagine some admissions counselors are like, there's no way I would do that. But sometimes I think that's what, when you build the trust, that's the next step of that trust. So I love that. I love that approach, Bridget. That's really, really good.
Well, and Bart, too, I think it helps develop really strong employees in the admissions counselors, too. Those are really great skills for them to have no matter what they decide to do. If they decide not to work in admissions counseling or higher education, I think that's just a really great skill that not a lot of people are comfortable and good at, that develop them way beyond any career that they might choose after as well.
It's leadership development, and I think that's great.
Bridget, along the lines of selling, which we'll use that loosely here in higher ed, I do know that you promote innovative engagement strategies. So could you share some examples of some of those proven strategies that have been effective, that are beyond the traditional methods that a lot of us know within higher ed?
That's a tough question, Troy, because to me, they don't seem innovative. Like, they just seem like, common sense probably isn't the right word, but to me, I guess I'm just so used to doing them that they're just kind of second nature to me. And I do think that since the majority of my background has really been working at institutions that had to fight for every kid that we enrolled, it gives me, I think, a little bit more of an edge, an edge probably isn't the right word either, but it helps prepare me to fight and try to find efficiencies. And I say it all the time in my day-to-day work at Encora. Some are probably sick and tired of hearing me say it since I've been there for 9 years now. But, inquiry pools aren't going to grow by 20, 30,000 more students over the next 10 years. And everyone, I think, there's not everyone. There's a large, I think, contingent of people who think, because I think they've been taught that way, and it just seems natural. Like, if I can build the top of the funnel, it'll just all kind of magically flow down. And for me, who have seen the demographics, like a lot of people have too, it's like, well, what if that doesn't happen? Are there ways that we can find ways inside the funnel that could help us be more efficient? And so for me, it's not about as much growth of numbers, it's about growth of conversions a lot of times. Like when I first started at the company and started building the team, when I was hired by Clint Chapman, and the two of us together were trying to decide on the way that we were going to approach being a consultant and evaluating college data. For us and for Clint, mostly it was about a kind of impact versus action, right? Like, what things can we find within the data that can actually help us do better? What if campus visits are doing really well for us in terms of conversion, but we have really small inquiry numbers? Are there things that we can do within the institution that can potentially grow that inquiry volume, which would then mean more students enroll because we convert so well at the end? But how do we do it without spending more money or causing a bunch of people more work? And I do think, there are ways. I know it sounds pretty simple and a lot of people are doing it now, but I remember when I first started, I was like, hey, are you including your campus visit information to your prospects? I mean, your prospects are getting all of your search information, but why not just send them your emails about your campus visit events? So, I mean, if a prospect comes through as a campus visit inquiry instead of a search inquiry, 10 times out of 10, they're going to convert better in the funnel, right? Yeah. So, I mean, that's free. And you've already got those kids in your system, recruit them as campus visitors. And I think you see a lot more people doing it, although I don't know if it's I still see some institutions not loading prospects into their CRMs. And so, because it's sometimes hard or impossible to do, same in terms of like, now all of these institutions have CRMs with engagement scores. Encora, has our predictive models that we assign scores to students that kind of indicate those that we should be focusing on. Like, how do you use the information you have on these students to better recruit? Don't do like I did when I first sat in that desk and just started calling from the A last names down to the Z's, and then the next day from the Z's to the A's, right? Like, call the kids with the highest engagement scores. Call the kids with the highest predictive model scores. Like, you've got to work smarter, because that's the only way that this is going to happen. The Common App source right now for me and yield strategies is a big one for me. It seems as if it's kind of this huge, ginormous, amalgamous like thing that everyone is just kind of used to it being there, and not used is probably not a word, but accustomed to sluggish conversions. And my question is like, can we impact yield on those kids? Can we maybe segment them out and focus on, again, engagement scores or predictive model scores? And we're not talking about growing conversions on yield to 30-40%. That would, I'm not Wonder Woman, but even converting them 2 to 3%, like that actually will put butts in seats, which so many of us need. And so many of those kids who actually are applying through Common App need to find a place to sit too. Let's find ways that we can do really great work with what we have, so we don't have to be dependent on that growth at the top of the funnel. It's just about, again, working smarter, not harder.
I love that idea, because I've been, last few weeks I've been talking to schools, and they're like, hey, this is where we are. This is, what are we going to do? We need to kind of do some things. And I think that yield strategies is probably the place, especially if you look at yield from one part of the funnel to the next. So it's like, how many apps do you have that maybe they've started the online app, but they haven't even submitted that? Flush that out and say, hey, if we have 100 students in there who haven't even finished the physical app, let's get that done. How many then do you have that haven't finished, completed the app? We're waiting on just their transcript or waiting on one other piece. Flush that out. And even if you could just start moving that needle just a little bit on each of those different parts of the funnel, that's what makes a lot of sense, because I mean, I had somebody the other day say, well, should we just buy a bunch more names at the top of the funnel? And I'm like, I think there might be some other things at this moment right now that we could do before we go there to really kind of just get those students that have already raised their hand, have already done a fair amount of work to get to where they are. I mean, maybe you've already accepted them and you just need a really good strategy to, get the deposit and move them on. And so I love the fact that you are kind of encouraging that, and that you all have those kind of tools as well.
Yeah, I agree. Most definitely.
Bridget, for our final topic today, would love to get your take on both professional development and mentorship within higher ed. And as we know, mentorship plays a crucial role in any profession, but how do you approach the mentorship within our industry to keep professionals engaged and growing?
I mean, some of my best friends I've met in the industry, right? And I've been doing this for over 20 years now. And so I guess I have met a lot of people and have had a lot of time to build those relationships. But I think it's really hard in this job to show vulnerability, especially now, probably more than ever. I can understand, because I've seen it myself. Like, it's tough to tell your vice president, or it's tough to tell your president that you're not comfortable with particular things, right? Or that you need professional development to grow in those items. It's tough sometimes, I think, especially in that middle manager spot, to find the time to get to conferences or to listen to those webinars, because I think you just sometimes feel like the water is just right here, right? And if you take any time to do anything but continue to tread water, like, you're going to go straight down. And so I think it's really important, mostly, and kind of what I've learned, especially over this last year, is just to try to make yourself as available as possible and tell people. And that's actually, I think, how Troy, you and I first connected, is through LinkedIn and some of my posts about, like, I'm just here if you want to talk through things. Like, you don't have to tell anyone that you don't know, right? You don't have to show fear. No one has to see the fear in your eyes. Like, just know that you have people out there who have been through it before and are more than willing to listen and to brainstorm and strategize with you. And if I don't know, I have people that do know that can help you out with that specific challenge. It's been tough, and this industry's always been tough, I think, because we're in some ways competing with each other, and so we don't necessarily want the competition to get an edge up on you. But the nice thing about me being on this side of the desk now is that doesn't matter as much to me. My passion for developing people to be super strong enrollment managers and stay with the job and do really great, amazing things and educate the next generation really takes over. And I just would encourage anyone listening to this podcast who has something to give, be open about giving it. Make sure people at your local, ACACs or regional ACACs or other conferences or LinkedIn, just know that, you're a free therapy session if they need it, or, a free conference session, I guess, too, if you need it as well.
I think that's such a good point. And I think you bring up something that I've noticed. I mean, I had a corporate background, and I know a lot of people have started either corporate. I mean, yes, I was, as a student, I was in the admissions office doing, camp teams and call center and stuff like that. But I went into graphic design and went down a marketing career and came back to, loving higher ed because as a first gen student and a lot of other reasons. But it's one of the industries that I think that, yes, even though there is competition, it is still very friendly. And I think that anybody would answer any question at any time, even if they happen to think that, you're a competitor, because I mean, we're selling life change. We're not selling, a widget or a cell phone or something else. We're helping people change their lives and the outcomes of the rest of their life. And so I think that it's a little bit different. And I would echo what you said, Bridget. I mean, anytime somebody, wants to reach out to other people or reach out to even what I would consider, the evil vendors. I think they're not as evil as what you think they are. A lot of them, are have been in your situation before, and they are more than happy to just give you some advice and some free consulting. So I echo that totally.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, Bridget, we end all of our episodes by asking our guests to offer a piece of advice that could be quickly implemented once listened to and taken action on by a listener. But before you give that answer, I'm going to ask Bart to just acknowledge our supporters that we would like to thank.
Yeah, Troy, I just want to obviously thank Ring Digital. That's what Troy works for. They are the ad targeting people. So I love the fact that they can take your list that you have in your funnel, upload it, and target the ads specifically to the devices just in that household, which I think is really cool. And then also Caylor Solutions, my company, we do marketing and branding and design. We've been focused a lot on AI training. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know.
Thank you, Bart. And now, Bridget, for that piece of advice, what can you offer that could be quickly implemented that would move the needle for an institution?
Well, Bart took some of mine already, but
Sorry.
no, I will go back to it though because I think it's important. I mean, I think, and especially with the implosion of application pools. I mean, thanks to like Common App and some of the initiatives like the direct admissions things that are kind of popping really app and accept pools up quite a bit is you've got plenty there to recruit at right now. It's just about finding those pockets, and it's exactly like Bart said. Like, do we have kids that were just missing one tiny thing to complete a file? Do we have for me, I'm thinking too, like kids who have filed a FAFSA, but we don't have an application on. Like that was always a big list that we were focusing, even app generation right now. And okay, yeah, your mom filled out the FAFSA and put her alma mater on there, right? But a lot of times there is things that come out of that list, and heck, they're already done with the FAFSA. So it's just the kind of the hard part now is done. So it's just seeing if you can find some really interesting information in what you have that can maybe push those kids forward, like engagement. Are they opening a lot of emails? Are they coming to visit campus right now and not applying? Are they coming to visit campus now and haven't filed a FAFSA? Like, what things can you take out of what you have, and maybe just tweak it a tiny bit, and it could help buffer a stronger accept pool. I mean, we're talking a lot too, like, or have you even asked the accepts where they are in the process, or what things do they need that maybe they haven't gotten from us? Like, ask them directly what will help tip the decision one way or another. Again, just to give you the information that you need to, I mean, heck, they're giving you everything that you need to make that step. So don't think you've got to start from scratch. I don't think at this point it's usually just going to cause more stress and agony and low return on investment. Try there absolutely. And again, call me if you need help finding those things, because I think 9.7 times out of 10, there's got to be something there that maybe you just haven't thought about. And it's not because you're not a smart enrollment manager, right? It's because you've got plenty of other things that you were been worrying about for the last 6 months, 12 months, 16 months. So, just approach it maybe a tiny bit differently, because there are opportunities there for you to jump on most definitely if you need that extra oomph right now.
Perfect.
Our wonderful guest who is offering for our listeners to give her a call or to contact her is Bridget Krakowski. She is the Vice President of Enrollment Services at Encora. I believe she is a wonderful, relevant, and authentic follow on LinkedIn. But Bridget, if someone would like to contact you, what other ways could they do so?
Yeah. So my email address is my first name, so Bridget and then K at encora.org. Of course, LinkedIn's good, but those are the two biggest. I'm on email all the time. My team unfortunately says so. Yeah, I'm easy to find if you need me. So yeah, please, I'm here to help if you need anything at all.
Thank you, Bridget. Bart, any final thoughts that you would like to offer before we close the episode?
I'm not sure I would have much to add to what Bridget said there. She did it so succinctly, and I think she and I are on the same page on that. We've kind of kept going back to that same thing. So I would encourage that. And then the only other thing I would add is just understand your distinctiveness. I mean, at the very beginning, we talked about that idea of what makes you different than everybody else. It's not small, warm, and friendly. What is it? And I think that's worth exploring and spending some time with your team on that.
Thank you, Bart. I also want to give a shout out and an endorsement to our wonderful producer, Rob Conlon, and his entire team at Westport Studios for making us sound and look good each and every week. So, on behalf of myself, Troy Singer, Bart Caylor, and our wonderful guest, Bridget Kurkowski, thank you so much for listening to our conversation today, and we will see you next time on the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast.